Hello and welcome to episode 42 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. On tonight's show, I'm going to be talking about a photo shoot I did with Mrs. Green's Tea Lounge. Now, if I just flick that over to there and minimize that, or that even. Which was a shoot I did for Mrs. Green's Tea Lounge in Dumfries. A lot of fun. We decided not to do the shoot in the tea shop itself, but went out on location. So more about the decisions made on that, the fun we had doing it. There's a behind the scenes video of the creation of these photos as well. Also tonight, Lucas was doing some photography, some long exposure photography on traffic, and was wanting some help with not blowing out the highlights. VG doing some flame photography for festivals, wanting to know a bit about how to darken the background a little bit more easily. Nuria was out with her camera, desperate to take photos of robins, was delighted to take a couple and is looking for a bit of feedback on that. Greg stitched together several photos in Photoshop or Lightroom, but he found that the horizon wasn't fitting together particularly well, so we're going to discuss where the problems might lie with that. And then there's been quite a bit of talk in the group, Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, about still life. So we're going to talk. Ben submitted this image and started talking a little bit about the old masters, specifically Caravaggio, and the notion of chiaroscuro. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. That's pretty much what we're going to be covering this evening. So, welcome. We are here live on Facebook, so leave me a comment, let me know you're here. It's always good to know that people are actually watching and listening in. Looks like we have a couple of comments already. Nuria says, saying good evening. Stacey is good evening from sunny but cold Pennsylvania. And better yet, to find someone reasonable to cut a dead pine tree that threatens my home if it fell. Okay, sounds like a bit of drama going on with for you, Stacey. Lucas is saying good evening, everyone. Diana is hello from a wet and windy Wales. And Rosie is hello, Kim and everyone, from a very wet Isle of Whithorn. So that's great. We have people. Always good to know I'm not here just talking into complete emptiness. If you would like to support these podcasts, there is always buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Not compulsory, but always appreciated. So, tonight, quick thing is, these are also being recorded. You might be watching these on YouTube, in which case, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, make sure you're up for notifications so that you know when new episodes go up. Generally speaking, Tuesday nights is when I'm doing the live podcast. Always lovely if you can watch along live because you get to comment. That's Becca coming with Evening All, watching and cooking tonight. Cool. Oh, and Ursula's also in from British Columbia in Canada. And Jim's here from Dumfries. Hi, Kim. Looking forward to this episode. So yeah, that's great. See, if you're watching live, you can join in the comments. You can comment as we go. I periodically kind of leap in, see what's going on, so you can respond to pictures, you can ask questions, put across your point of view on things, and it's always a lot more interactive, a lot more fun. However, fully accept the fact that it doesn't suit everybody's time scale. If you happen to be, further east than India, or or you don't, or you're working, or your time, it just doesn't suit you this time of the evening, then that's why these get recorded and then put up on YouTube on a usually Wednesday afternoon UK time. So that's pretty much it. I think the kind of beginning stuff out the way. Right, so let's talk then a little bit about Mrs. T's Green Lounge, or Mrs. Green's Tea Lounge. Mrs. Green's is a tea room started up a few years ago now in Dumfries, and quite quickly rocketed up to this pretty much the number one position on TripAdvisor for places to go and eat in Dumfries. Uh, there's a whole kind of nostalgic feel to Mrs. Green's. Very often you will find Mrs. Green, Angela herself, and the staff will be wearing headscarves, a bit like a kind of 1950s housewife. Um, Although it wasn't decades specific, there was a general sort of nostalgia, anything from sort of 1940s, 50s to 1970s, really. Um, it's the kind of thing where constant things were reminding you of your childhood. Um, Even things like the menus were tucked into the little Ladybird books, which small books which you, when you were young, you sort of learned, kind of basically learned how to read via these books. So and then yeah, that the whole kind of mood and feel of it was just nostalgia. I think kind of feel good nostalgia. So lovely place. We started talking about the idea of doing a photo shoot. But very quickly, what came out of the conversations I was having with Angela was the fact that Mrs. Green's felt more like it was a concept as much as an actual place. And as such, we didn't really need to do the photo shoot in the cafe. There were other, maybe we could sort of do it elsewhere and kind of again evoke a kind of nostalgic feel. So ideas got bounced backwards and forwards. We drew up this great long list of possibilities. And eventually we settled on Dumfries and Galloway Aviation Museum. And part of that was because they've got all sorts of planes and what have you, but they've got a section, a front end and a middle section, no wings on it, of, now I scribbled it down because I can never remember exactly, a Hawker Siddeley Trident 3B, basically a wee passenger jet. And they were more than happy for us to use it for a place to do the photo shoot. So what I decided to do was Angela and the women who were working in the cafe, I think they did a day trip up to Glasgow or something and went and rummaged through costume shops and secondhand shops and bought all these different outfits, got hold of them, and then on a dreich wet Sunday afternoon, we went out to the Aviation Museum to do the photo shoot. So what I'll do now at this point, actually, I think is I will. I'll show you the video that we did. Now, if I can flip that over. Nope, not that one. That's the photo. Where's the there's the video. Yep. Here we go. So basically, a lot of fun with this. As you can see, they all got their outfits, helping each other to do them, do all the makeup, get all the bits and pieces. Cake was an idea of getting it sorted out, didn't quite work as well as we thought. But here you can see we're now in this sort of central part of a plane, having lots of, lots of fun and giggles. And I'm taking photos, showing them how it's going on in the back of the camera. Now there is a bit of music that runs in the back of this, but I discovered the one that I did, was it last week or the week before with Peaky Blinders, that actually it set off YouTube saying it couldn't be shown in certain countries because of the music, so I've had to turn the music down on this one. But here you can see one of the photos that we did from it. Well, the idea was to sort of party on a plane, really. We're going to be, playing cards. I found this old typewriter as well. So yeah, they've been kind of raiding props departments as well as outfits. And then we moved through to the front of the plane, so I got my friend Tom was busy videoing this, and he was sort of tucked down behind the seat, trying to make sure that he could sort of film what was going on. So that was that's kind of the video of the behind the scenes thing. So I thought, okay, let's flip back over here. So really what you can see here is, you know, the key shots. Now, the more observant among you might have noticed that in the video, the seats were red. And in this, they're blue. And what I will do, I will just show you the original photo. This is the edited version. This is the original one. And here you can see, apart from the fact that, you know, I've brought more detail out, the shadowing and what have you, but the seats are this purpley orangey red. I mean, I think this plane was originally built in 1971. So you can see from the seat coverings, it's got that very early 70s feel to it. Now, the immediate problem with this is Angela's wearing this fabulous bright red dress, and the impact of that gets lost. When I met up with them out in the car park, it's like, wow, bright red dress, look at that, isn't that amazing? And when I was editing and I was playing around, I started to think about that kind of, very often when you're watching the movies in 1960s movies, there's a sort of certain teal blue colour, kind of Pan Am blue as such, that you get. And so in the editing process, I sort of recoloured one or two of the chairs just to see whether it would look all right. And it did. It looked considerably better, which on the one hand, I thought is great. You know, I mean, overall, the photo works much better, I feel. But on the other hand, I just remember having this deep sinking feeling of, oh, damn, it works. Because it works, it was extraordinarily difficult to do. I had to go around and mask off all the areas to do. And you see, it's not just the fact of colouring in the seats, but if you look at the original, you'll find things like there are sort of the skin itself has a reddish tinge where it sort of reflects off the seat, you know. So the light on the flesh here is much redder, and you don't realise just how red it is until you turn the chairs blue and suddenly realise everybody's skin looks very red and it doesn't quite look right. So when I did the changes, I also had to sort of go through and create a slightly cooler sense just on the edge of things like the arms and bits of leg, and wherever the red had been reflecting on the skin, I had to kind of turn that to blue as well. What I also did with this was, again, to kind of keep the nostalgic feel going, was you can see it's sort of got that sort of slightly faded look to it. I've desaturated some of the colours, but slightly oversaturated, you know, but still allowed the reds to kind of stand out a little bit more. And so it's got that little bit more of that kind of coloured feel, you know, of a kind of 1960s Polaroid almost, or certainly colour photo. So that was the whole kind of idea of it. Had a lot of fun that day. And the other photo that we went on to do was this one, where the biggest problem here was, of course, out the front window where was a car park on a wet, drizzly grey day. And that didn't look very convincing. So for this, I found a photo I'd taken out of a plane window when I was, you know, flying off somewhere on holidays from years ago, and photoshopped that in instead to you know. And again, if I flick through, that's the original shot, and you can see here cars in the background, a bit of a wing coming in from something else, and it just, well, at that point you don't get any sense of them flying a plane. Also, this is an old plane which has, you know, had better days, and there's bits where the coverings are tearing off, and, you know, it's all looking a bit shabby. So, you know, I patched that in and things like that, as well as putting in the sky. So that was that shoot, and I think it was one of the. I mean, what was great is that they were all so up for it. You know, I've got a group of people who are just, you know, we're going to have fun with this photo shoot, And they went to the nth degree. That they got their costumes, they had fun, they were all playing around. You saw in the video just how much laughter there was. And I remember the Aviation Museum was just really pleased to be used, to take part. We weren't charged any money. We just made sure that we credited them whenever we, showed the photos with thanks to. I think even I've linked their Facebook page in the stuff that I've been, promoting for tonight's show. So yeah, it's one of those things where I suppose really is to try and get across the point that if you've got ideas, go for it. That you don't have to be necessarily sort of, limited to your immediate surround. Well, at the moment we do. At the moment we're all kind of in lockdown. Well, in some parts of the world anyway. I'm not sure where you are in your part of the world. In UK at the moment, they've kind of gone very strict at lockdown. Dumfries and Galloway Aviation Museum is currently closed to the public. But hopefully once we get past this, it will of course open again. And the point being is that there's all sorts of different areas and places you can go to create really interesting photos. And sometimes all you've got to do is ask, and if you're polite and you're enthusiastic, there's a lot of places out there which will be more than happy to help out. So that's what I wanted to talk about that. So what we'll do now is we'll flip back, see if we've got anybody else has joined us on Facebook, if we've got any more comments. Oh, right, VG's joined us from India. Good evening, everyone. And Greg from Devon is saying hi. Hope you're all well. Becca agrees that it feels much more vintage by having the blue seats. And yes, so does VG and Nuria. Stacey says nice editing. Thank you. And she likes the vintage flair. It reminds me of when I was 13 traveling to Florida on Eastern Airlines. They gave me wings. And VG also points out that the flowers they sport on their hair and the one on the tea jug match as well. Just double flip back on that, and yeah, yes, you can see that Angela's got roses in her hair up there and roses on the teapot as well. Yeah, and that will not have been coincidence. Angela Green's got an amazing set eye for detail, and that's part of what came out in Mrs. Green's Tea Lounge as a place to go. So yeah, it's working out all these little details, each kind of add. Just for those who are interested in the lighting, that this is essentially a 2-light setup. I'm standing, or is it a 3? No, I think it's 2. Basically, I'm standing with, I'm trying to look the shadows now. Suddenly, I'm not sure whether it's a 2 or 3. At the very least, it's 2. Basically, where I'm standing in the middle of the aisle taking the photo, and I've got just to my left, over my left shoulder, I've got the main kind of key light hitting them. I suppose you can really tell by where the shadow of her hair is falling on here. Her shadow is creating an outline here, so that kind of gives you a sense that the light is really quite close to me. But the main thing was that just having that front light, the back of the aeroplane wasn't showing up at all. So I had to put there's an off-camera flash sitting behind Angela here, and you can tell from the well, first of all, you can tell from the fact that it's lighting up bits of the back of the plane here, but there's also getting the edge light catching on her hair. You can see it catching on Maggie's hair over here as well, and bits on the hair. So so that backlight then is what's really lifting them out of the darkness with that. So yeah, a 1-light setup just wouldn't have worked with this. When I set up the first light and took the shot, it kind of, the background just sort of disappeared into darkness, and then you didn't really get the feeling of it being on a plane so much as you felt more like you were on a set rather than on the plane. Right. Oh, Sandra's here. Hi, everyone. I'm glad you could make it, Sandra. Now, somehow I managed to just knock the... Doesn't really matter. Close enough. Right. Okay. So, what we're going to do now then is we're going to move on to the critique section. Critique section is the place for you to send in your images. In essence, we're all wanting to improve our photography, and we can pick up tips and tricks and learn all these bits and pieces. But there's nothing like really having somebody who's got a sense of what they're talking about, giving you genuine, direct feedback on your images. The problem we have is that very few people will do this for us. Most people, well, quite rightly, are trying to be nice. So when we put our photo up on Facebook, everybody clicks like, tells you how lovely it is and how wonderful it is. But that's not necessarily helping. And then there are some people who will tell you exactly what's wrong with it in a not particularly tactful way and just make you feel a bit, why did I bother? So the idea of setting up this whole corner of the internet was to be able to help you improve your photography. So if you've got problems, if you've got difficulties, if you've got sticking points, then you join the group Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres on Facebook, and there you can submit images. If you're watching on YouTube and you don't do Facebook for whatever reason, then you can always email me the images. But whether you're posting them on Facebook or emailing them to me, the important thing is to let me know what it is that you're struggling with. You know, is it about the composition? Is it about lighting? Is it about is it conceptual? You know, wherever your difficulties lie, if I've got an idea of that, then that makes it easier for me than if just saying, oh, here's a photo, what do you think? Because there's pretty much any number of answers to that one and it doesn't really help you. So let me know what your sticking points are and put the images in. As I say, if you find these useful and you would like to support the podcasts, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is always appreciated. Right, okay, oh, right, okay, what have we got here? Okay, VG was saying she spies the tripod legs behind the girl dressed in red. Sorry, I am going to have to flip back on that one then. Tripod legs behind the girl in red. You are right. There we go. Very well spotted. Yep. That will be holding, that will have the flash on it. There you go. I didn't even notice that. That's very, very observant. Oh well, lucky it's an old photo. If I have to start showing this one again, I'll obviously have to go back in with Photoshop and take that out. I'm kind of surprised I didn't take that one out actually. Yeah. Oh well. Okay. Cool. So what else? Oh right. Okay. Ursula's got a question here. A question for in a shoot like this. How much do you keep control of both the idea and the execution? I assume it depends on client/situation and so on. I assume also you keep control of the technicals, right? But not quite as much as the other aspects. Okay, that's a really good question, Ursula. And I think this comes down to certainly style of photographer and how you approach photography with other people. There are quite a few photographers out there, possibly even most photographers, excuse me, who, when they have an idea, they want control over that complete idea. They've got a very strong vision in their head, and then essentially the photograph is trying to replicate that vision as strongly as they can. Some people go meticulously sketching and drawing things out. Now, if you're just an artist working for yourself, that's not a problem. That's fine. You do things the way you want. When you're working with a client, you always have to take the client's sensibilities into consideration. Now, sometimes the client is just saying, you tell me what to do. But for me, I always feel that there's a very strong collaborative affair, both with the client and the person and the people that I'm photographing, whether that's the client or some other people. Um, the There's that notion that your client and your subjects are also one of your biggest resources. Yes, you're right. In terms of the technicals, I'll keep an eye on the technicals. Chances are I know more about photography than the people I'm photographing or the people I'm photographing for. Um, and there are things where where I will turn around and say, well, okay, look, I need you to move left a bit so that you're blocking out that light, so that we can't see the tripod or whatever else it is. And I can arrange things. But most people bring something with them to the shoot as well. And I love that notion of collaboration. I love that idea of working with other people's minds, um, getting their input, because other people will come up with ideas that I would never have thought of. Everybody's brain works in a slightly different way. Some brains work in very different ways to my own. And if I just limit myself to my vision, I kind of feel, well, I'm then limited to my world and my way of viewing the world. I find the world is an awful lot bigger once I can start enjoying how other people view the world as well. So there's a whole kind of fundamental philosophical conceptual thing going on here, really. A lot to unpack. But that notion of collaborating with other people is part of what I really enjoy with photography. I want I want everybody who's actually involved in the photo shoot to feel they are, but to take a certain level of ownership of it, to feel that they had real input in it, that they're not just mannequins for me to arrange and move around, but that actually they contributed to the overall image as well. And then that way, everybody on board feels so much better. Everybody tends to enjoy the experience much better. Everybody's then much more keen to go out and share and rave about how much they enjoyed the photo shoot. Because the photo shoots, again, yes, there's ending up with a final image, but a lot of it for me is also, and for the clients, is the experience of getting the photo. When we're up on in that plane, it's not just a case of something's been, the plane's been booked, it's all been worked out, we then go and arrange everybody. Each of the women who was involved in the photo shoot went and worked out their costumes and had fun kind of researching, deciding how they were going to do their hair and makeup. They were consulting with each other, they were bouncing ideas off each other. And then once they're on the plane, there's a case of, right, okay, here's the space I've got to work in, because I didn't know until I was actually in there how 7 people are going to fit into that space. And then I move them around, and then somebody says, oh, well, what if I try this? What if I gesture over here? What if I lean on, put my hand on her shoulder? Or what if we sort of raise glasses? And you go, well, okay, let's try it out. And so you try these things. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you realise that, your original vision was better. And sometimes you come across something where you go, wow, that's just brilliant. And it's these kind of things which you have to allow the space for that to happen. You have to create an environment whereby people feel relaxed enough, trusting enough, and enthusiastic enough to feel that their voice will be heard and that it's fun to come up with the ideas. And that way, I think, virtually all my photos, certainly the ones that I feel are my favourites, but the ones that I think have all worked the best, have tended to be the ones where I feel it's been a strong collaboration with the team. So hope that kind of gives you a sense, Ursula, of that. So yeah, you have to you have to allow. You have to give up a certain level of control, but it isn't really, because you're still in control. Everybody still turns to you. You're the guy or person with the camera. And so everybody's still deferring to you. They know you're in charge, but what you've done is create an environment in which case people feel a bit better. Second question: why did the cake not work? Yeah, basically what happened was Angela had ordered a cake from somebody else. And said she wanted a cake to have on a cake trolley. And when it turned up, it had some kind of coating or covering on it, which she just didn't like. She thought, oh my God, this wasn't what I was expecting. I mean, Angela was perfectly capable of making the cake herself, but was so busy working everything out, she outsourced it. And when it turned up, it wasn't quite what she was wanting. They then spent a while picking off the outer coating and trying to get by with it. And we did do one of the photos which actually had the cake in it on the trolley, but I became quite aware quite quickly that that photo never really got shown. It was sort of quietly hushed away by. So it's these other ones with the party and the tea in the cockpit, which became like the dominant photos and the ones that I've tended to show since. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. Okay, Sandra's saying to VG, can I have your eyesight? Yeah, what's that? Spotting the... yeah, it's not so much eyesight, it's a way of looking, isn't it? Right, Ursula says, thank you for the answer. Ben's joined us. Hi, Ben, glad you could make it. Okay, so, cool. Okay, let's move on then to the critique section then, and what I think we'll start with is let's just lift ourselves up a little bit. We'll start with Nuria's robins. So basically what happened was Nuria said, good morning Kim, I just thought I'd share these photos for you with you. I took them out while I was on my morning walk exercise. I've always wanted to take a decent photo of a robin, and that day was my lucky day. So let me just find the robin and flick over. So she took 3 photos. First one I really love. I just wish I'd framed it a little bit better. And I think you're right. There's a notion of it does, especially on the left there, feels very kind of a bit cropped in. We've got the feet coming down here at the bottom, but that just kind of clipped off. So, but having said that, there's beautiful detail in the feathering. So that's rather lovely. This one I think has a much better sense framing of it. And then you've got this one where you've got much more a sense of background. It basically says, the first one I love, I just wish I could have framed it better, but I love the way he's staring at me. What could I have done better? Any feedback would be much appreciated. Thank you. Now, kind of a tricky one for me. This is where Rosie, you're in tonight. Maybe you could give us a couple of hints and tips. Rosie's a much better wildlife photographer than I am. I noticed today, was it today or yesterday, you posted some of a little field mouse or something, which I was quite blown away with. How do you ever get that close to that kind of wildlife? Maybe it's another conversation we can have sometime. So I think with these, one of the things I do remember that Rosie had mentioned on this one, what she particularly liked was, or what she also liked was the catch lights. So what I thought I would just talk about briefly here is the notion of the catch light. I've mentioned these sometimes on other occasions, but just open that in Photoshop for a moment. And what we're talking about here is we've got the robin, but in the eye, you've got this little bit of light here, which is just reflecting, a bit of sky or a bit of sunlight or something. And what it does is it brings the eyes to life. And just sort of by comparison, if we go to this one, let's open this. Now, first of all, with this, your robin is very centered, and so I think I would want to, I think you could quite easily do a kind of rule of thirds type crop with something like this. Will probably suit it quite well. Just sort of, and then depending on how much background you're wanting or how close you want to get in. However, that aside, here you don't have the catch light, and the eyes just look a bit dead. Now, it's not, we know the robin isn't dead. That's not really what I'm saying. But when you compare it to this one, the eyes just look like they've got so much more life to them. And all it is that little dot, which isn't sitting in here. Or is there is the faintest of light, slight fractionally lighter bit up here, but you can barely see it. Now, if you're trying to shoot a robin which is, you know, some distance away, the chance of you noticing whether there's a catch light or not is going to be pretty small. One of the things plenty of people are quite prepared to do is actually stick one in post-production. It's not unknown. If I just create an extra little layer there, take a little paintbrush and take that down really small, and where are we? Right, that's a bit too bright, so I'll just take that down a little bit, something like that, and maybe just even move it fractionally to the, you can just take it to the edge of the eye like that. And can you see immediately what a kind of difference that makes to the sense of life in the bird? Anyway, that's just the kind of little thing I just wanted to kind of point out with that actually where you can, if you're photographing people, if you're photographing pets, if you've got the chance of actually, you know, you're not trying to photograph something which could fly away at a moment's notice, and you've got time to line up and get the lighting how you want, always try and look for the catch lights in the eyes, because it really does kind of bring out an extra bit of life. Okay, so other than framing, you know, is there much more you could do? You know, I don't know. Rosie, do you have any suggestions? Rosie says, I do love a robin. Okay, what have you got? Yeah, she loves the second robin. And oh, the field mouse was done with a 600mm lens. Wow. That's a biggie. That's how you get in that close. So, yeah, and Nerea is saying she had to be quick before it flew off. Yeah, like I say, unfortunately, wildlife photography isn't my speciality, but basically, if you can, the main things are, first of all, capture it. If you can get it before it's flown off, that's number one. Number two, which is really pretty much as important as number one, is get it in focus. If you can get it in focus before it flies away, you're doing really well. You're already ahead of 95% of people. Then you're thinking about framing. Where is it sitting? You know, are you zoomed up really close? What aspect are you trying to, do you just want the head of, whether it's a robin or whatever, a squirrel or whatever other wildlife you're photographing? Are you wanting to get it in context? And you sent in three. You've got one really close up, one kind of with a bit of space around it, nice sense of breathing. I think that one works the best. And then you've got one in a wider context, which I think, you know, is another way of doing it. The bird or the creature in its environment, which is good. Then start worrying about your focus, your focal point, your depth of focus. So that, yes, you get it in focus, but if you can get a wider aperture, then the background will go more out of focus. You'll get that bokeh effect, and it will help to isolate your robin or whatever at more easily against a busy background. And then, if it's possible to do anything with the light, which it probably isn't if you're photographing a wild animal. The most wildlife photography where you look at it and you just go, oh wow, it's got the light and it's got the composition and it's got everything else, are quite often set up on one level or another. Now that might be, you know, somebody has set up, they know roughly where the squirrels go, so you know, so they set up a place where they know the light is going to be nice. They scatter some nuts. They sit under a blanket with a cameras sticking out of the edge of the blanket for 3 hours, waiting for the squirrels to turn up, and for 2 weeks nothing happens, and then, you know, on the 19th day or something, suddenly a squirrel comes in and they get their shot. So you can go kind of at that way of doing things. Sometimes it's even more. I remember there being a bit of controversy a few years ago. There was, I think it was BBC Nature Watch or one of these. Anyway, there was a photo competition for a calendar. You know, where you put in your photos, and the best ones were for use for the calendar for the year. And the one that won was a little field mouse on a stick of corn with a half-eaten apple next to it, and you know, it was just like a kind of an illustration from a Victorian sketchbook or something. I mean, it was beautifully composed and done, and all the rest of it. And you're thinking, how on earth do you get a shot like that? And it won, and then it turned out, well, yeah, but basically it was a pet mouse. It was a pet mouse, and a set had been made with the grasses, with the apple, and the mouse, and what have you. So, I mean, still a really good shot to take, but not quite and it was done out in the wild, not quite like Rosie's field mouse once. Actually, I think what I have to do here, because I think it's kind of unfair not to, I'm going to flip over to Rosie's page. See if I can find this a sec, Rosie. I'll just show people your mouse photo. Rosie didn't put these in, but these are the ones where I was just kind of watching, thinking, wow, to imagine to actually get that close. And there you go, it's starting to move there on the move. So yeah, I was was seriously impressed. I just wanted to give you that little shout out for that one, Rosie. So I would say, yeah, Rosie, if you really want to learn a bit more about wildlife photography, probably talk to Rosie a little bit more than me on this one. But there's no doubt, I think, to go back to that one, I think this is the best of the three of them. So thank you very much for sending those in, Nuria. I hope that was, you know, I don't think I've probably given you amazing advice, but maybe the catch lights helped a bit. So let's just see if we've got any more comments. Sandra's saying that makes a difference, having the catch light. Stacey's agreeing it's really hard to get the birds. Rosie's saying she's going to use the catch technique for catch lights. Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I've done this before with portraits as well. You know, I mean, sometimes especially if you've got a wee group shot or something like that, and somebody's head is just slightly blocking out the light from somebody else, and somebody's got a slightly dead eyes. I've been known to paint catch lights in before now. So Ursula says, with the last Robin pick, would it have been possible to slightly blur and perhaps darken the edges of the background? Yeah, I mean, it's in Photoshop. If you haven't managed to do it, get it sort of in camera, then there are certainly techniques where you can start edging in. Yeah, I suppose let's flick back to this a sec. So if we take this, and if I just quickly go into Camera Raw and go to Optics and Vignette. So if you vignette, you're darkening down the corners like that, you're automatically tending to draw a little bit more attention into what's in the middle. It's a very busy background. Trying to blur this effectively without it looking a bit naff isn't going to be that easy. I mean, if we kind of filter, essentially what you would do is you can blur it to whatever level you want. I'm going to have to do this more because you're just watching this on a small screen, and then what you can do is mask the robin, essentially paint it back in. Now there's ways of playing around with it so that you get your edges a little bit more, and you have to go in and sort of essentially push pixel by pixel to get it right. But the thing is even if you do that, the reality is it wouldn't just be the robin. There's this twig that it happens to be sitting on as well. You'd want that in focus, and that's a very, very busy kind of thing. And I think if you just blur the outside in the same way that you darken the outside, I'm never quite so keen on that style as well, because it. But it is it's a sort of slightly tricky one with that. But yeah, you can always play around with the editing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with playing around with the editing afterwards to see what other effects you can do with that. Okay. Ben says, great shot, Christmas card next year. Yeah. BG says the blurred background will make the Robin stand out, but yeah, for the problems that we just talked about. Rosie, I always use a single focus point to spot metering. A shutter speed of 1000 to 2000 for birds. Now that's a very fast shutter speed. For birds in flight, or aperture priority for more stationary birds or animals. Rosie said the country file calendar, that's the one with the mouse. Okay, you remember that too. So, yeah. Okay, excellent. Yeah. Sandra's praising your mouse photos, Rosie. And Nuria's happy with the feedback. Okay, and yeah, Nuria's saying that it's the original photo. She's not had time to play with it yet. Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, the fact is, you take the photo, you get as best a photo as you can. The better the photo you can get, the more you can do with it in post-production. More you can do with it with the editing. So, great start, and I think, I don't know that, like I say, I'd love to give you more on that, but wildlife isn't my speciality. But hopefully you've picked up a few bits and pieces, and I think Rosie's talk there about camera settings, using a very high shutter speed if you're going for birds in flight or movement, is probably a very good one. So, okay, thank you very much for that. So next up then, what I thought we'd do is we'll look at Greg. Now, tricky one for Greg here. Basically, Greg sent in this photo, which is of Berryhead down in Brixham in South Devon. So, and what it is though is that it's actually 6 different photos stitched together. So he sent me the original photos as well. So we start off over on the left of the picture, and then he stood there and literally sort of gone round in a circle, and then stitch them together and crop them, put it like that. And Greg says, a pre-sunrise panoramic image of 6 images stitched at Berryhead in my hometown. I made a bit of a rookie error with this series of shots. I was shot using my wide angle lens at 11mm. 11mm is very wide. The issue was with lens distortion. Even after applying lens correction profile for the lens when stitching the frames together for the panoramic, the horizon was not straight and a number of steps appeared in the horizon caused by lens distortion. After much fiddling in Photoshop, I managed to get it acceptably straight and level, but not perfect. Any advice on how to correct this effectively in Photoshop would be appreciated. Now, Greg did then send me through a bunch of the images, and I've been looking and playing, and I can see the problem that he's got. What I did was I kind of went through and did a bunch of stitches together. So there's a number of ways you can combine. In Photoshop you can auto blend photos together, and let's just actually show you how that works. So let's close those for a moment. So I'm going to take Greg's 6 photos, drag them into Photoshop, and so here you can see these photos. Now, if you then go to File, Automate, Photo Merge. Photo Merge, the little box turns up here, and then you have options. So you can browse for the files you want to do. I've already got these open, so I'm going to click Add Open Files, and that's added the 7 files together. Now it's giving us several different options of ways we can blend them together. There's auto, perspective, cylindrical, spherical, collage, reposition. Now sometimes one of these will actually work better than the auto, but let's just click auto for the moment. So if I click auto over here, up in the top right corner, it's now opened up a fresh thing, and it's going to start stitching all these 6 images together using the AI systems. You can see it's created them. It's now working out, blending them, and here we have then the image. From here, I can then maybe crop this how I want, because I obviously don't want these bottom bits in, so maybe I can bring them up to there, bring this into something like this, and crop there, take that up. I'll do a rule of thirds on the sky bit there, something like that, and then hit enter. And just patch up that little bit of sky over in the corner. So here we have then, they've all been stitched together, create this nice kind of curve and the horizon line, except for the fact that when we zoom into the horizon, Photoshop's not done a very good job of, there's suddenly, it's not a smooth horizon, there's a step here, and then there's another step here, and then there's another step here. And what we know to be a straight horizon hasn't come out particularly straight. And it's a bit of a problem because, I mean, you can sort of go and do these things manually, but it will take you forever doing it all manually. So it's really good to be able to, as you can see, you go to automate and bam, the whole thing is done in about 30 seconds. Now there are different, so that automatic one didn't work quite so well. I tried some of the others, the other options. So now, for example, this one's collage, and what this is, but this has stuck them together and it's created a curve. Likewise, I did spherical, also has curved the horizon. I did a repositioning as well. This one worked, sorry, this one works slightly better, but again, we've still got steps in there. And perspective, it was just doing really funny things with that one, couldn't get it to work at all. So the auto settings don't always work. Now, I think the basic problem with this is that because you've got a wide angle lens on and you've got it sitting pretty much about as wide as it will go, or very wide, wide angles distort at the edges. And so if we take one of these pictures, let's take a middle one like this. The horizon, whilst appearing to be straight, if I take a line and drag it down here, let's zoom right in. Let's line that, so this line is absolutely on the horizon line here at the top. I don't know whether you can even see that on there. As I move over to the right, there's actually a little gap between the blue line and the horizon here. And again, as I move over to the left, we end up with a little gap again. So what's actually happening is it's not quite straight enough, it's curving. And then when you stick that next to another picture, which is also curving, and then another picture which is also curving, Photoshop isn't quite able to sort of straighten up the edges as such. And so when it comes to sort of sticking them together, that's where it becomes noticeable. Now, where it's got problems happening, say, down in the busy rocks or the grass, that's not so much of a problem. If a little bit of rock, you know, if one of these tiny little pebbles or bits of lichen or something isn't quite matching up with another bit, you're never going to notice it. But on something like a horizon, you're really going to notice it. And the only way that I can think about it is essentially to try and correct it in the first place, you know, before you try and stitch it together. So if we take something like this photo, and then what I do is I'll copy, create a second layer, and then I click on the move tool, which allows me to, now if I want, I can grab corners and move and stretch and make things, what have you. But the other thing to do is up over on in the middle here, there's a bit interpolation bicubic, and then there's like a tiny little window thing which allows you to stretch. And what that allows me to do is I can grab any bit of the picture and distort and move it a little bit. So if I now sort of zoom in and essentially go back to there, and hold on a sec. Let's go back to here, click on here. Now I've lost it again. Right, for some reason I now seem to have lost that little... I've clicked something and it's gone. I will find it again. But the point being is that what you can do is you can kind of click and adjust and just make subtle movements into the picture so you know your horizon is absolutely straight before you put the picture in to the blend mode. And that's the only thing I can think of to kind of get around this, is to essentially just guarantee you know, go in and push the pixels until you know your horizon line is absolutely straight. Then hopefully when Photoshop comes to putting it together, it should sort of do it all in one go. So I can't really, I could play around for another several hours with this, Greg, and I don't know that I might stumble across another thing, but that's really about the best that I can do for that one. So I hope that's useful on some level. Wish I knew what I'd actually done with. Yeah, who knows? Anyway, there was a... I will look again for that later, because again, I could spend the rest of the evening trying to sort things out to find them. So let's close those. Okay, so thanks for sending that in, Greg. I hope that there's maybe a little bit of useful information in there for you somewhere. Okay, right, what have we got here? Right, Becca's applauding Greg's landscapes. Greg's thanking Becca, and Ben's saying that he loves doing panoramics. Yeah, panoramics can be a lot of fun, and there's certainly a lot more fun since Photoshop's AI got a lot better at I mean, I do remember some panoramics I started doing when it was first stitching them together, and it would sort of do all sorts of really weird things with the stitching, a bit like that perspective one where it sort of shot off in funny directions. But it's got much better at it, and you know, the software is there. Let it help you. Okay, right. So next one then. Let's talk. Let's go to Stacy. And okay, so Stacy said she went to last Sunday. Took another drive to Philly. I presume it's Philadelphia. I parked about a good mile from the City Hall on South Street, 1 block from Broad Street, which on this side is called the Avenue of Arts. The reason for being there is there are several theatres. The reason being it's called the Avenue of Arts is there are several theatres. On the left side is the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Okay, so let's show you the photo she created. So Stacy says, it was built in 1908. That's the Ritz-Carlton Hotel on the left. It's a very posh and expensive place to stay. I walked up and found a perfect spot to photograph City Hall and Benjamin Franklin's statue on top of the building. It took several steps to highlight and darken areas to enhance the centre, which is the building. Now, okay, so Stacy's gone to Philadelphia, and this is one of these kind of prime spots. This is, you know, I think I've seen a couple of photos, a similar kind of thing. It's a beautiful, grand building. You've got the buildings on either side, up the avenue, looking towards it, which kind of frame it quite nicely. So the question is then, you know, are there things that we could have done to improve this a little bit? You've already been playing around with this. I don't know what the original was like. This is just the version taken from Facebook. And the fact that we can see the detail in the shadows means I know full well you have already had to lift some of the detail out of the shadows, and the highlights are not burnt out either. So, you know, you've got pretty good exposure on that. However, there are a couple of things to talk about. One is something that's happened with the way that you've been doing the lightening and darkening is if you look around the edge of the statue here, it's got this very kind of dark patchy area. Now I know that sometimes happens when you're playing around with contrast, or there's one of it, my memory was that a sec. Let's just open an existing file. I can't remember for the life of me what the slider is called, and I'm kicking myself here. Camera raw filter. Where do we go? Basic. Clarity. That's the one. I don't know whether you were using the clarity one, but the clarity one kind of. Now, if I'll show you what happens here. If I sort of zoom in on a bit of rock, try and find it here, and I take the clarity, you can see that what happens is it's starting not just to sort of affect the rock, but the edge of where the rock hits the sea. And then if I do that again, things sort of start happening kind of funny at the edge here. So you can start to see here on the edge that the sea, you've got a darker bit of sea, but then there's a kind of lighter gap between. And what happens is where there's edges, where you've got light patches and dark patches, the clarity helps if you're doing a little bit and you're doing it subtly. You overdo it and you end up with something like this, which is quite horrific. A little bit of clarity can lift something. Too much and it sort of becomes slightly overkill, and what happens is you get this effect again then where you've got the dark, a darker patch of sky on that. So you do have to be super careful with that. You can see it again here. We've got a light patch next to this building and a dark patch next to the roof. So where, and around the railings. So where there is strong contrast, the contrast is then kind of fed in and bled into the rest of the picture. So that's a bit of a shame, because that kind of, takes away from what otherwise is, quite a lovely, it's worked in the detail in the building, but it stopped working when you sort of got to the edges. The other thing I tend to feel with this, Stacey, is a little bit more room to breathe. I think if you could have stood back about 20-30 meters, get a bit more of the buildings, get a bit more height above the statue, and actually get in the road as well, because this is already, we can see from the traffic lights here that you're tilting up. You've deliberately not put the road into this. Now, I suppose that's, the fact that you've not, that could be that is, an artistic way of doing it. So if you prefer it that way, then that's fair enough. I think for me, I do tend to feel like I probably want to get a bit of road and get the bottom of the building as well, and also a little bit more space above the top. So I think at that point you would then sort of have that more room to breathe. This just feels kind of a little bit too claustrophobic, I think, that closed in. I think if you were sort of standing back about 30 yards or so, and then took the shot and allowed the bottom of the building to be in shot and a little bit more space above the statue, the head of the statue, that would have given. The other thing with this is it feels slightly tilted to me, and I don't know. Let's just open this in Photoshop. I just want to kind of check if I take a line here and I put it through the center. I put it through the center of the clock. At 12 o'clock thing there, or that's 3 o'clock. Exactly 3 o'clock you took this photo, I take it then. Either that or it's stuck there. It's gone slightly off center by the time you get to the top there, which means it's leaning over to the right very slightly. Now you can see more clearly here that this building is also, we've got, if we touch it to the edge of the wall up here, there's quite a gap down the bottom here. So now there will always be a little bit of a distortion because of the way that you're using the lens, but I do kind of feel that it would be nice to just tilt that just a fraction, and then you find you can breathe slightly better. So yeah, always try and make sure that if your picture's got a really strong vertical, you've got to make sure that vertical stays vertical. Maybe the outer edges can tilt in a little bit or out, but I mean, and even for that actually, you can always click and maybe stretch that a little bit out to sort of straighten them, take the top edges out, something like that. But you sit and play. Okay, so those are the main thoughts for you, Stacey. Is like I say, give it a little bit more room to breathe, and beware that when you're playing with the contrast, and you're playing with that clarity to try and create more texture in the shadows, you can end up with this problem of um, where we end up with these sort of dark shadowy patches or bright lighter patches around the edges, and it's the edges then which kind of give it away. So hope you found that useful. Right, okay, let's take a little bit quick look. Stacey says too many people and traffic, just didn't want the cars, and that's fair enough. It's about getting the balance as to what you feel happiest with. Becca likes your concept and appreciate the tip. Right, okay. Ben's suggesting boosting the blue saturation in calibration in raw filter. Well, again, I think there's a certain amount of, you can play around with your saturation as well. You're playing around with your colours. If you're boosting the blue, you're going to kind of boost all of them, so there will be a bit, or you're going to bring everything up to an over blue. So I think that you're going to have that problem whichever way you do it. So kind of watch that with the editing. But yeah, play around, see what else you can do. But the main thing is, first of all, be aware that that's happening, and then you can find solutions for it. Cool. Okay. So next up, I want to go for Lucas. Now, Lucas did send in a couple. It's already we're well past the hour, so I'll just take the one idea that he was talking about. So first of all, where's it gone? Okay, that one. And so here we go. And Lucas says, well, his technical settings for anybody who's interested: f13 at 20 seconds, ISO 100. Taken from the bridge in London last year. I'm not 100% happy with the look of the highlights, but maybe it's just me. However, if anyone has an idea of how to make them look better, feedback is more than welcome. So a 20-second exposure, this is allowing for car lights and trails. So essentially what happens is within 20 seconds, any car will have travelled the entire length of that bit of road, possibly further, depending on the speed that they're going at. I can't see whether there were speed restrictions here, what they might have been, but it doesn't take, even if you're doing 40 miles an hour, over the course of 20 seconds, you will have covered more than that length. So what we're seeing here is you don't see the car anymore, because the car has come in and moved out of the picture during the 20 seconds of exposure, but the light trails have left their mark. And because this was taken yeah, that's right. Because this was taken in Britain, you'll notice that the rear headlights are on the left of the picture, and the rear brake, the rear lights, sorry, which are red, are on the left of the picture, and the white lights of the headlights are on the right side of the picture. If this was taken in most countries in Europe, or was taken in America, you would expect the lights to be the other way around. Now, whilst the red lights have turned out looking fairly okay, the white ones have just kind of been overdone a bit. They have overblown. Now, really, and I think you are right with this, Lucas, that it has kind of been overdone. Looking for sort of ideas around that. Now, interestingly, Ben, thank you for this. Ben came in and put in a picture in the comments where what he was suggesting was so here's one that Ben had done from a bridge, and what Ben had done was given it a blue shift, which I thought was quite interesting. Where's Ben? Ben's response was also bring the white balance down a touch. This will cool it a little too. I found that works with traffic mapping shots. I like that notion then, that you've got that kind of bigger colour shift where you've got the reddy yellows there on one side, and the bluish tinges on the other, I think works really quite well. However, even if we put the blue tinges into this, it's not going to get round the fact that basically too much of it has gone in together. So in essence, it's really just a case of overexposure. And I think if you, instead of doing 20 seconds, you adjusted it to 15 seconds or you adjusted it to 10 seconds and really kind of see what you get. Because, I mean, when you do look at Ben's picture, it's not just a case of that it's blue. The fact is the highlights aren't burnt out in the same way. You've got the strip now. Admittedly, there's less cars in this one. It looks like there's probably one or two cars going off on the left here, maybe only one car coming towards. Whereas in your one, there's a lot of cars coming. But light is all still about exposure, and maybe even if you underexposed a little bit more, even if you went down to, I don't know, 5 seconds or 1 second, start seeing what you get. It's really one of those you have to play with. I can't give you an exact figure without actually sitting there and playing with the camera, but you take your photo, you look in the back of the camera, you go, that looks good, or, oh, the highlights look blown, I'll dial it down a bit. And I think really it's one of those things, dial it down. You can always, it tends to be easier to, if you've got, I mean, if you're working at ISO 100, you're going to have a lot more detail in there to bring out in the post-processing afterwards. So if you don't be afraid to go a little bit darker. You can pull more detail out of the shadows in Photoshop or Camera Raw than you can pull details back out of the highlights. Sometimes you can bring little bits of detail out of the highlights, but generally speaking, you tend to find it's easier to bring out more from the shadows. So I'd be tempted to underexpose what you're doing, even if it means that the cityscape in the background feels darker than you would have ideally liked. I think you would be able to probably brighten that a bit more in the editing process. So hope that helps, Lucas. But yeah, lovely idea. And for anybody, find yourself a bridge, take a tripod or your beanbag, balance it carefully, very carefully, keep it strapped around your neck. Tripod's better. Find a bridge and get the traffic going. I know VG's been talking about doing this kind of shot. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about VG also trying to do light trails, but a bridge is a really good place to do it because you've got the traffic going backwards and forwards in directions. So, okay, so thank you for sending that one in, Lucas, and thank you for your input on that as well, Ben. Right, okay. Okay, Rosie's asking whether a ND filter, neutral density filter, would help with the blown highlights. Generally speaking, with ND filters, the way they're most commonly used is that that you can use them for, it's a bit like sticking sunglasses on the front of your lenses so that there's less light coming into them. Now, there's a couple of different ways. You can either have ones which are neutral density or density all the way across so that everything has the same amount of light restricting coming in it. There's quite a lot of filters you can get whereby, say, it's just dark on the top. And what that allows you to do is take photos of landscapes where the sky would be too bright. And so the sky becomes darker, but the landscape itself doesn't. And it's sort of gradated down subtly so that you're not aware of the difference. And some of them then also have bits of colour, so you can give a blue tinge or a purple tinge, more purple tinge into the sky. I've seen those kind of things as well. Now, the main thing about using an ND filter, like sticking sunglasses over, is that works best if you're in very, very strong sunlight. If you're in really bright light and you're wanting to do a longer exposure, then the problem with trying to do a long exposure in bright sunlight is bright sunlight's just going to overwhelm everything. If you're trying to take a picture of the setting sun and the sea, say, moving in and out, and you're wanting that soft, smoothie, creamy effect, then what's going to happen is the sun's just going to blow everything out. So you stick the filter on, That makes everything darker. That allows you to do your 2 second, 5 second, 10 second exposure without the sun blowing out the highlights. Now, in the case of Lucas's picture, it's already dark. It's already nighttime. And so he's not contending with the sun. Now that basically the problem can probably be solved by just dialing it down a bit. Now Lucas has added on here 10 and 5 seconds didn't look right enough for me, not enough cars. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I think it's really about trying to find the balance. Which is more important? Is it the number of light trails, or is it whether the light trails look like they're blown or not? And and then if you want more cars but you don't want the high, you go back maybe at a busier time of the day. What about, okay, Lucas has also added in, what about 4 photos with 5 second exposure and then stitch them together? Certainly give it a try. There's no harm in trying these things. There are, all I can really say, I think, Lucas, is give it a go. Have fun with it. I mean, you've obviously found a space that you can do this with. So have fun with it. Yeah, go out there, take lots more. And you've already shown with lots of the photos that you've already submitted over the last sort of several weeks and months. You know what you're doing with the camera. I think this is probably as much a confidence thing as anything else. I think, that really try, just don't take one photo, take 20 photos at a 5 second exposure, take 20 photos at a 10 second exposure, take 20 photos at a 2 second exposure. Play around whether, if it's too dark at that, up the ISO a little bit, or, sort of play around at that kind of level. And then when you get back and you're playing with it in Photoshop, you'll see whether, like I say, like if it seems a bit too dark, you can pull more detail out of the highlights. So I think there are options there. I mean, you've got it at f13. What if you put it maybe at f16? That might also darken it down a little bit as well. I know we talked once before about the idea, maybe if you go up to f22 and what have you, but lenses don't always work at their best when you're kind of pushing them at their absolute narrowest aperture. But I think there's definitely options there to play with. And Ben's saying, I did use ND filters for dome trails. If I need long trails like a country lane where the traffic is less. Okay, fair enough. Then yeah, play with ND filters as well then. So yeah, lots of options to play around with. So hopefully that gives you a couple of ideas to go out there. But go out there, play, and if you end up with something where you think, hey, this is really cool, this worked well, let us know how you did it and post it for us so we can all take a look. And I know that particularly this is something that VG is particularly interested in, is being able to get some of these light trail photos as well. So anything you learn, make sure you share it with us. Thanks very much, Lucas. Right, okay, next up, what are we up to? VG. Okay. So VG is, actually let me just have a drink of water here. Let me try and find VG's photo. All right, so she sent me the edited version and then an unedited version. So this is the edited version. This is the unedited version. We'll come back to that. I'll leave it with the edited one while I chat. And so VG said, back to Flames, an old image. I've mailed both the original and the edited one. For this image, I need your inputs for the way I have edited it and how to do it better. I'm just learning the tricks and trades. The original image has so many more elements in the background. I just thought about removing them. So just to go back then, this is the original photo, and you can see there's lots more going on in the back. What happened there? There's a lot more going on in the background. We've got this sort of wreath of flowers. We can see somebody's shirt there in their hand. We've got bowls, and could be rice or food of some kind. Other bits and pieces, another hand in the background over there. So so what VG did was she essentially went in and looks like painted out the background, judging by little sort of bits over here where you can see there's a kind of sharp edge on some of these bits here, maybe sort of masked quite hard, and yeah, a little bit sort of sticking through there. So the problem then of trying to make it black without, you know, so wondering if she could have done anything. Interestingly, I mean, VG there does talk a little bit more about the rituals. She said we could skip this part, but to be honest, I found it really interesting. Just a little information behind the image, be it marriage, housewarming, first birthday of a child, during pregnancy, whatever. There are functions that are held, little functions that are held in India. We celebrate it with rituals related to our religion. Fire is mandatory for all festivals. Click this one on such an occasion. The bricks are placed, decorated with rangoli, the white coloured flour, and filled with sand, and little sticks are burnt. The steel container has ghee, which is a kind of clarified butter, I think, which is the fuel that keeps the flame going up for a few hours until the end of that particular occasion. The other container, made out of leaves, has cooked rice, which is thrown inside the fire while adding the fuel. Our wedding vows are made in front of a fire, both the beginning of a person's life and the important milestones and the end of it all happen with fire as a constant companion. Fire is a holy ingredient of our lives, and it is one of these things I've noticed. VG, flames very often come back into a lot of the themes of your pictures. This explains a bit more why, so thank you for that background information. I find that really fascinating, and it's great. It's not just the notion of here's a photo, but here's why this photo is important to me, and I love that aspect of photography and what we're doing here with the kind of community we're building up as well. It's the stories. The stories are so much a part of it. So what I was going to do with this then is I was just going to show you that if I open this with Photoshop, there are a number of different ways. Let's close Greg's picture and Stacey's picture. So yeah, the problem of trying to darken down the background. Now, although the question is do you necessarily want the whole thing as black as you had it? Now, because when we go to this photo, yes, it's black, but it sort of feels there's quite a lot of space around the edge. I kind of feel like I'd like a bit of texture there. Maybe not, as you say. That's a tricky one actually, because part of me slightly prefers this photo. I quite like the fact that there are people around and that there's a context to the flame. It's a bit like the fact that I like your story behind it. It's not just a flame, it's a flame in a context. So I quite like that. Now, if you feel that that's overpowering, one of the sort of easiest ways to play around with this is if you take the curves. So if I go and grab the curves, and then I literally sort of grab a middle of it and then just sort of start darkening down. Now what you'll notice is because the flame is so bright, it's the last thing to darken. Now I mean I can, eventually take this down to here and that just looks a bit silly. But you can kind of darken down the backgrounds somewhat. Now at this point we're darkening down the foreground as well. So what I'll do is I'll just create a quick mask, not that one, that one, around what we want to keep in the foreground. So I will mask off the fireplace. I'll keep that bowl in. I don't want that bit of bowl. I'll just take that down. I do want that bit of brick. So this is just a very rough kind of thing here. And then when we go to here, I will I'll turn that to white, and then I can hold on, undo, right, so quick selection to into the mask on the curves using the white. I can paint over that and just bring back in what we had before. Now so you can see the kind of quite a strong line there, so maybe I'll just sort of gently tap over the edge of that, bring that back in a little bit. So you can soften the edges depending on how much you want to do that. Now, and then at this point with the curves, you can either go back to the curves and then darken, so grab that, darken it down more, darken it down less, brighten it up for that matter. But you can sort of find a level at which you want, so that maybe if you've got something like that, you've darkened it a bit, so the background isn't as intrusive as it was, but you can still make out some of it, and you can bring it down, or you can just take it to that point and then do what you did of the notion of taking the black brush and then actually painting out any of the extra little elements that didn't want to go at the same time. But I would say have a think about this of actually, sometimes I think the background in this case, you're kind of adding a little bit of texture, which I quite like. So hopefully that helps a bit, Fiji. Just a kind of quick one to kind of give you something. So yeah, I would say play with curves as your first part. Now, one of the things I will point out about the curves though is that you might notice that as well as darkening, where the flame as well getting darker is tending to richen up with the saturation as well. It's one of those things with curves that when you turn the curves down, the colours tend to get slightly oversaturated as well. So not quite so noticeable at this point with this flame, but if we really take it down, you notice it starts getting very red and oversaturated. So at that point you might want to sort of lessen your saturation as well to compensate. But anyway, hopefully that gives you some starting points there, VG. Okay, oh, Robert's in. Howdy from Texas, better late than never. I'm glad you made it, Robert, and hope your meeting went well. Rosie says she uses ND filters for waterfalls. Would very much like to try light trails, but not much traffic in the Isle at the moment. That's very true. Not even in even in the grand metropolis of Castle Douglas, there's very little traffic going on out the window at the moment. And Rosie also thanks Fiji for the story. Cool. Okay. Now I am aware that sometimes I found after these podcasts, I go back through the comments, and periodically I find comments that I definitely don't remember turning up. So if you have said something and I've not happened to comment on it, it may well not have shown up here, just to let you know I'm not deliberately ignoring anybody. Okay. Now, next thing we come on to here, kind of the last part of tonight, is the notion of still life. Basically, what last week I said, look, if there's anything you'd like me to particularly talk about or chat about, you'd like more information on, leave that in the comments as well. And Sandra left a comment saying, suggestion for next week's podcast, indoor still life and close-up photography. I've suggested this as I can't really go anywhere due to lockdown. The knowledge and skills discussed in the podcast could be practiced more or less straight away. And this actually set off a 16-comment chat between Sandra, Jackie and Nuria. And which was great. And I thought that was a lot of fun, lots of chat going backwards and forwards. And it's something to make the most of. Another reason for being part of the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group is there's a chance to chat with everybody else. It's not just about me giving advice from on high, some kind of lofty pedestal or anything like that. This is the idea of it. We're kind of creating a community about this where we can help each other out, whether it's sort of Ben showing what he was doing with the light trails to help Lucas, or Rosie giving advice on doing bits of wildlife photography for Nuria, or there's options here to play, to tap into the skills and the support of the other members as well. So I love the fact that you all kind of got chatting over that. Now, and on the back of that, actually, Ben came in and put in a photo as suggested by Sandra's still life. Here I wanted to create a painterly effect with the lighting extreme chiaroscuro, which was called Tenebrism, the Shadowists, developed by Caravaggio. It uses darks to suggest volume. And where are we? We're on that one. And so Ben put in this photo and then wrote quite a bit about painting styles and referencing quite a lot of different artists and what have you. Now, the thing is with still life, I mean, this is one version of still life, which is, you know, obviously vase of wilting flowers as well. Feels a little bit to me, now I love the idea of playing with shadows, big strong thing of mine. I love Caravaggio. In case you weren't around, this was my fantastic present that I got, my kind of complete volume of Caravaggio, full of fantastic photos and details and what have you. Quite a weighty book, but wonderful. And it goes back to this idea that if you know, there's a lot of stuff. The old masters knew what they were doing with light long before the camera ever came along. But one of the things I noticed, I will just say for this, Ben, when you look at the likes of Caravaggio, is that he very rarely goes completely black. Even the blacks have lots of subtle bits of texture in. So I think you could have, now, this is already edited in, so I couldn't bring any details out of it, but I'd be tempted to sort of just pull back a bit. Again, it looks like a kind of curves thing has been dragged down, and then the flowers themselves have become a bit oversaturated. And I think if you sort of came back a bit with your curves, allow some of that texture to come through in the shadows. Yes, Caravaggio and the likes really use shadows beautifully, but it's the notion of shadow, not necessarily black. Yeah, blacks do sometimes come in, but not anything like as much as you would think. When you really start studying a lot of these old masters, there's huge amounts of texture and extra subtle layers within those shadows. In the same way that when you look at something with shadows, you can quite often see just what's in the shadow, though it's obviously obscured and you can't always make it out. You're still aware of there being something else within it. It's not just a patch of black. So playing with shadows can be really fun, rewarding area to go down, and it's about playing with subtleties. The problem we'll then have, of course, is that not everybody's got the same brightness of screen, and so what can appear really beautifully subtle on one screen, it just does just look completely black on somebody else's. The other thing I would say with this is you kind of cropped off the bottom of the vase as well, and I kind of want to get a sort of slightly, you know, give it a little bit more room to breathe, come back, step back a little bit, get the vase in as well. But yeah, but I love that idea that you're coming up with, Ben, here, which is that notion of playing with the shadows. So this is coming back to this notion of still life. Now, part of the problem, Sandra, is I know when you ask the question's almost a kind of throwaway, quick, easy, indoor still life, close-up photography. I can't go anywhere during lockdown. What can I do? Kind of thing. And the problem is, though, is it's a much, 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 much bigger question than you maybe realise that you asked. Still life is a whole huge genre of photography in its own right. Much like landscape photography or portrait photography or astrophotography, you know, that there's street photography. There are whole entire genres for which there are thousands of things, elements that go into, or ways of expressing yourself through it. There isn't kind of one quick easy answer to still life. Still life, in essence, or indoor photography, is pretty much anything you could do indoors that doesn't require you being outdoors. And so limits our imagination. So if the problem is ideas, then it's about trying to find ways to generate ideas. And ideas can be generated by looking at what the old masters were doing, going online, using Pinterest boards, Google Images, start kind of mood boarding, type in ideas. There's also what you're capable, you know, what you've got to hand as well. I mean, I noticed, was it last week, I think you put in a picture of knitting and your book, your notebooks and some bits and pieces. That then becomes a kind of still life. there's a whole area whereby people use toys. I've seen there's a massive sort of subgenre of Lego photography. People creating whole dioramas, create tableaus and scenes out of Lego men or Playmobil. There's a local lad, a friend of my daughter's, who James Rhodes, who I was having a lot of fun with some Playmobil. There's a particular band that he loves. I think they're Canadian, and he created a little scene of the band out using Playmobil characters, and sent it to the band. The band absolutely loved it so much they commissioned him to create a scene, set of photos, which they then put on the album of their next, the cover of their next CD, which was just absolutely brilliant. So then there's a wonderful artist, or photographer called Victoria Ivanova, Ivanova. If you're on PhotoCrowd, she's on PhotoCrowd. She's also on 1X. There's a couple of other places. She's also on Facebook. And she does the most amazing thing with pegs or with pairs, and with just little, everyday household objects. She'll line them up, but they kind of look like characters, and there's moody lighting. Absolutely has to be seen. But so whether you want to sort of create scenes or whether you want to, emulate the old masters, there's huge amounts you can do. So the thing is that it's a very kind of big subject. Now, I think really the kind of areas where you probably would most help to start is noting that a lot of, if you look at paintings, typical still life, whether that's the vase of flowers or the food, where you've got some fruit and some bread and a pewter jug and things like, that kind of thing. They always tend to have a single light source, and that single light, because it's usually a window. A lot, it's bearing in mind that most of the great, the old masters were painting in days before electricity. So things are either done by candlelight or they're done by window light. So if you can find an area in your house near a large window, and more important, or well, not more importantly, an important aspect of this is to make sure that your window light is either north facing or it's done on a not sunny day. A sunny day will create a really hard shadow coming through. Now you can play around and get effects, but if you're talking about sort of traditional style, you want a softer shadow, and a softer shadow will come either on a slightly dull day, you still want as much light as you can, or say a north facing window, or window where the direct sun isn't basically coming in directly. Obviously, if you're in the southern hemisphere like Jackie or some of the friends in Australia, then a north facing window is the opposite of that. You want a south facing window, but essentially you want a window where the sun isn't coming in directly, and as big a window and as much light source as you can. See if you can set up some kind of situation there. Now, I don't have time to do it this week, so what I've decided I will do is, for 2 weeks' time, I'll do a sort of still life special as such. What I will do is I'm going to go and do a little bit of research. I'm going to look at some of the old masters' still life type pictures, and I will attempt to create my own. And what I will do is I will then show you what I've done and talk about the different processes that have taken place, what I've done, tips and tricks, what failed horribly, pitfalls to avoid. I'll take setup photos so you can see how I've set it up and what I've done. So we'll do that for 2 weeks' time, which I think is probably around the 2nd or 3rd of February. 2nd of February, I think. Next week, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing next week, but I'll work that one out. I had thought about doing still life, but I've got too many things on this week, so I know that I won't be able to commit to it for next week. So I will do that for 2 weeks' time. So Sandra, hope that works, gives you some ideas. But yeah, take a look at the old masters, take a look at what people are doing, whether it's toys, whether it's objects around the house. Um, there's lots of ideas, but if you don't have artificial lighting, if that's not your thing, the main thing is a window. Find a nice, as big a window as you can with as much light as you can. Ideally with the sunlight not directly coming through, but at this time of year, then you don't have to worry too much about that. Again, yes, I'm talking with a northern hemisphere bias. You still have to worry about that if you're equatorial or you're southern hemisphere. Um, and like I say, what I will do is I will sort of see if I can work out some really come up some useful tips for you, and obviously hopefully anybody else who's interested. And if anybody else wants to join in with this as well, trying out their own still life ideas based on old paintings and stuff, then give it a go, and we'll, and then post them again if in 2 weeks time, and we can start comparing notes and having a bit of fun with that. So I hope that gives you kind of something to look forward to. Right, okay, just flicking back here, what else have we, a few more comments. Yeah, but Ben says he sees the book over on the Caravaggio book over my shoulder. VG said she'd love to have a look at that book, yes. And she loves the dried flowers. And Nuria said she's used DIY tools as still photography. Yeah, a bunch of screwdrivers and hammers and monkey wrenches. Yeah, you can have a lot of fun with that. Stacey says flowers are extremely nice to use for still life. I've tried to emulate the classics. Cool. Ben says, I use this example to highlight the point you made about looking at art and how they painted light, and how by looking at light you see the light. The print I have isn't as dark as it is on here. There is more in the shadows. Yeah, it happens so easily, and that's part of the problem, I think, Ben, and we see this again and again, sometimes with, like on Guru Shots, where we've posted a picture and it's not getting the response we want. And I think quite often what's happening is it's just different levels of subtlety. I mean, I've got two different monitors, and even though I've calibrated them both, one of them is an older monitor and tends to sort of create a stronger contrast. And quite often I'll take a photo, I've edited it on one monitor and I'll put it on another monitor and be quite surprised at just how much detail I thought was in there but seems to have disappeared. So we do have to be careful about that. I've also done it the other way, where I've tried to compensate from that, and then the whole picture's just appeared too light in other areas. Okay, Becca says, I recently tried out using fake bokeh as a background to a glass bottle of Coke, used a crumpled up piece of foil and coloured lights. Found the idea on Instagram. Okay, yeah, that sounds like a bit of fun. If you're going to do something like that, Becca, as well as, maybe it's quite good if you can kind of stand back and do like a set photo, show people the setup that you've done with that, and then post that in, and that'll be fun. Yeah, thanks for that idea. And Stacey says, still life is our challenge for the next photography club. Oh, well, okay. Will it overrun? Will it overlap with what we're doing? Cool. Right. Okay. Where are we at? Oh, 1:15. I was planning on having a slightly shorter one tonight, but we're already up to 1 hour and 3/4. Right. Okay. Let's wind this up then. So next week, like I said, not totally sure what I could do next week. I will have a dig through. I'll find some picture to talk about, but get your photos in for the critique. Any photos that you're still struggling with, you're wanting some tips, techniques, put them into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook page. Let me know where your sticking points are, and I will do my utmost best to try and help you out. And as you can see, we've got quite a community here that's also wanting to be able to help as well. If you found these useful, you would like to support these podcasts, Understanding Photography, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Not compulsory, but always appreciated. And in 2 weeks' time, I will make sure I've got a still life based on some kind of art, whether it's a replica of an actual painting or just inspired by a painting. I won't know until I've gone off and taken a look. But I'm going to give it a go and see what tips and techniques I can find out there by doing that, that I can pass on to you. And if anybody else would like to join in and do that, that will be for the 2nd of February. Look forward to seeing you then. So I'm just coming with a quick comment saying I normally try to do my still life in front of a bedroom window which is north facing, and usually the lighting isn't great, but I think I will have a look at the old masters for lighting effects to help me position items. Well, yes, the positioning is quite a big part of that. My favourite things to try are flowers and boots, and also my finished jumpers. Thanks to Kim and everyone else for their ideas and suggestions. Cool, okay. Oh, Rosie's back. Sorry, Google Chrome blew up on me tonight and I lost you. Okay, well, when I finish this, you can always do catch up, or tomorrow it'll be up on YouTube. It will also be up on my blog as well. So if anybody fancies reading my ramblings as well as rewatching this or parts of this, then do go to blogspot.com blogspot.kimayres.com for my blog. And right, thank you very much. See you all next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much for joining me. Cheerio.